61 AD. Somewhere along a Roman road in the British Midlands, a Roman general stands with roughly 10,000 men. In front of him, a mass of humanity so vast that ancient sources claim 230,000 warriors, though even half that number would spell doom. Behind the Britons, their families, wagons loaded with spectators, positioned to watch Rome's final humiliation in Britain. Here's what shouldn't be possible. By sunset, Tacitus claims 80,000 Britons lie dead. Roman casualties? 400. Even if you cut those numbers in half, in quarters, you're still looking at a slaughter so lopsided it defies every principle of ancient warfare. The Britons had already burned 3 Roman cities. 70,000 to 80,000 Roman citizens and allies were dead. The largest revolt in Britain's history had momentum, rage, and overwhelming numbers. And yet, in a single afternoon, it all ended. Not because of better weapons, not because of divine intervention, but because one Roman general understood something his enemy didn't. In the right terrain, numbers stop mattering. This is Watling Street, the battle where a shield wall became a meat grinder, where confidence became a coffin, where the physics of violence turned a massive host into its own executioner. And here's the mystery we're solving today. How do you trap 250,000 people in plain sight? How does a locked line of shields stop a human tsunami? And why did the Britons' own families, watching from those wagons, become the final, brutal piece of the killing machine? Because this isn't just a battle story. This is a masterclass in turning your enemy's strength into their suicide. Let's break down the only shield wall that stopped a human wave. The spark that lit Britain. To understand the slaughter, you need to understand the rage. Boudica wasn't born a rebel. She was a queen, wife of Prasutagus, king of the Iceni tribe in eastern Britain. When Rome conquered, Prasutagus made a deal. Cooperate, keep your throne, maintain some dignity. It worked. For a while. Then Prasutagus died. And Rome showed the Iceni what cooperation was actually worth. According to Tacitus, Roman officials seized the kingdom. They flogged Boudica publicly. Her daughters were violated by Roman slaves. Think about that. A queen, whipped like a criminal, her children assaulted. Not in some dark corner, publicly, as a message. But here's what pushed it from humiliation to explosion. The money. The philosopher Seneca, yes, that Seneca, the Stoic writer, had loaned massive sums to British nobles. Suddenly, Rome called in every debt. Families who thought they were partners discovered they were prey. This wasn't spontaneous rage. This was calculated humiliation meeting financial ruin. The Iceni had nothing left to lose. Boudica raised her tribe. Then the Trinovantes joined, then others. The revolt spread like fire through dry grass, and Rome's cities started to burn. The rampage, stay with me. Because what happens next sets up why Watling Street had to happen. Camulodunum fell first. Modern Colchester, the symbolic heart of Roman Britain, home to the Temple of Claudius, the emperor who conquered the island. The Britons didn't just capture it, they erased it. The temple became a tomb for the Romans who fled inside. They burned for 2 days. The 9th Legion marched to relieve the city. The Britons ambushed them. The infantry was annihilated. Only the cavalry escaped. Then Londinium, the commercial hub. When the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus arrived, he made a calculation that haunts military history. He couldn't defend it. Not enough men. He evacuated who he could and abandoned the rest. The Britons burned London to the ground. Archaeologists today still find a layer of red ash beneath the city, Boudica's signature. Then Verulamium, modern St. Albans, same treatment, fire, slaughter, erasure, the death toll, 70,000 to 80,000 Romans and allied Britons. Not soldiers, civilians, merchants, families, 3 cities gone. A legion, Broken. The governor in retreat. Here's where it gets strange. Rome should have lost Britain. The math said so. The momentum said so. Every strategic indicator pointed to collapse. But Suetonius Paulinus wasn't thinking about math. He was thinking about ground. The impossible math. When the revolt exploded, Suetonius was on the other side of Britain, in Wales, crushing Druids on the island of Mona. He raced back with everything he had. But everything wasn't much. The 14th Legion, detachments from the 20th, some auxiliaries. Total, roughly 10,000 men. He sent urgent orders to the 2nd Legion, stationed in the southwest. Their commander, Punius Posthumus, received the message. He didn't march. We don't know why. Fear, logistics, a judgment call that the revolt was unwinnable. Whatever the reason, a third of Suetonius's expected force never showed. Remember that name. Punius Posthumus. He becomes important later. So here's the situation. 10,000 Romans against a host that ancient sources number at 230,000. Even if we slash that figure dramatically, say 100,000 Britons, the odds are still 10-1. Suetonius had two options. Option 1, evacuate. Pull out of Britain entirely. Save the army, abandon the province. Option 2, fight. Find a way to make 10,000 men defeat a human tidal wave. He chose to fight, but not anywhere. Not on open ground where numbers would crush him. Not in a city where he'd be surrounded. He chose a specific piece of terrain. And that choice, that single decision about where to stand, is why we're telling this story 2,000 years later. Watch what happens next. The trap. Neither Tacitus nor Dio tells us exactly where Watling Street happened. Modern historians guess somewhere in the Midlands, maybe near Manchester, maybe near Atherstone. The truth is, we don't know. But we know exactly what the ground looked like, because both sources describe it. And when you understand the terrain, you understand everything. Behind, the Romans, dense woods. No enemy could circle around. No flanking, no encirclement. The forest was a wall. In front of the Romans, an open plain. Nowhere for the Britons to hide. No ambush points, pure visibility. Between them, a narrow defile, a bottleneck, a funnel. The approach compressed anyone advancing toward the Roman line. Here's why this matters. The Britons' greatest advantage was numbers. Tens of thousands of warriors who could surround a smaller force, hit from every angle, overwhelmed through sheer mass. Suetonius's terrain eliminated that advantage completely. You can't surround an enemy with a forest at their back. You can't flank through a funnel. You can only go forward, straight into the shields. The defile didn't just protect the Romans. It transformed the battle into a physics problem. No matter how many Britons attacked, only so many could reach the Roman line at once. The rest would stack up behind them, pushing, compressing, turning mass into pressure and pressure into chaos. In the right terrain, numbers stop mattering. Suetonius had set his trap. Now he waited for the Britons to walk into it. The deployment. The Romans formed up in the mouth of the defile. Center, legionaries, the heavy infantry, packed shoulder to shoulder, shields locked into an unbroken wall. The famous scutum, curved, massive, designed to absorb impact and create a fighting platform. Flanks, lighter auxiliary infantry, flexible, ready to support the center or extend the line. Wings, cavalry, massed, held in reserve. Not for the opening, for the finish. This formation wasn't defensive. It was a loaded spring, compressed, waiting. The legionaries knew exactly what was coming. They'd trained for this their entire lives. The shield wall wasn't just protection. It was a weapon, a machine designed to absorb a charge, stop momentum, and then counterattack into the chaos. Across the plain, the Britons assembled. And here's where confidence became suicide. The confidence that killed. Put yourself on that plain for a moment. You're a Briton. You've just burned 3 Roman cities. You've watched the 9th Legion break and scatter. You've seen the Roman governor flee from Londinium rather than face you. Every battle, every siege, every confrontation, you've won. Behind you, your family, your wife, your children, loaded into wagons at the edge of the plain. They're here to watch the final humiliation of Rome, to see you drive these invaders into the sea. In front of you, a thin line of shields, maybe 10,000 men. Your host numbers in the hundreds of thousands. You outnumber them 10 to 1, 20 to 1, maybe more. This isn't a battle. This is an execution. The Britons advanced in loose bands. No tight formations, no coordinated lines. Why bother? Numbers would decide this. Rage would decide this. The sheer weight of humanity would crush that little shield wall like a wave crushing a sandcastle. Boudica rode among them in her chariot. Tacitus claims she gave a speech, her daughters beside her, invoking every crime Rome had committed. This wasn't just war. This was vengeance. This was justice. The wagons settled into position. Families found their viewing spots. Children climbed for better angles. Think about that image. Hold it. Those wagons weren't just spectators. They were forming a wall, a barrier at the back of the plain that no one was thinking about. Because why would you think about retreat when victory was certain? Stay with me, because what happens in the next 30 minutes turns that confidence into a graveyard. Phase 1. The wave forms the Briton host surged forward. Imagine the sound. Tens of thousands of voices, war cries, horns, the thunder of feet and hooves and chariot wheels. A human wave rolling across the plain toward that thin Roman line. Here's where the funnel begins to matter. The plain was wide, the defile was narrow. As the Britons advanced, the terrain compressed them. Warriors who started, with room to move, found themselves shoulder to shoulder, then pressed tight, then crushed against the men in front of them. The fastest warriors reached the funnel's throat first. The mass behind them kept pushing. There was no way to slow down, no way to spread out, no way to do anything except drive forward into that narrowing space. From above, it would have looked like water pouring into a bottleneck, pressure building, flow constricting, the energy of 100,000 bodies focused into a space designed for 10,000. The Romans watched it happen. They didn't move. They didn't charge. They didn't throw their javelins. They waited. Phase 2. The wall holds. The first Britons hit the shield wall at full momentum and stopped. The Roman scutum wasn't just a shield. It was a system, curved to deflect blows, braced against the shoulder, interlocked with the shields on either side. When a Briton warrior smashed into it, he wasn't hitting one man. He was hitting a connected barrier that distributed the impact across dozens of soldiers. The legionaries leaned into their shields, feet planted, bodies braced. The men behind them pressed forward, adding their weight to the line. Here's the physics that saved Rome. The Britons had momentum. But momentum requires space to build. In the compressed funnel, warriors couldn't get a running start. They stumbled into the Roman line already slowed, already tangled with the men around them. The Romans had stability, locked shields, solid ground, training that turned 10,000 individuals into a single immovable object. The human wave crashed against the shield wall. The shield wall didn't break. Beat. This is the moment, right here. If that line cracks, if even one section gives way, the Britons pour through. The flanks collapse. The cavalry gets surrounded. Rome loses Britain. The line held. And then Suetonius gave the order. Phase 3. The killing begins. Pila. Every legionary carried 2 javelins, heavy, iron-tipped, designed not just to kill, but to disable. The soft iron shaft bent on impact, making the weapon impossible to throw back. At close range, certain aim distance, the Romans threw. Imagine the sound. thousands of iron points cutting the air, then the impact. Shields splintering, bodies falling, men screaming. But here's what the Pila really did. They broke momentum. The front ranks of the Briton charge collapsed. Warriors fell. The men behind them stumbled over bodies. Gaps opened in the press. The relentless forward pressure faltered. For a heartbeat, the Briton advance stalled. And in that heartbeat, the Romans attacked. Phase 4. The wedge Tacitus uses a specific word, cunium, wedge-shaped. The legionaries surged forward, not in a line, in a point. The wedge formation drove into the disrupted Briton mass like a blade into flesh. Now the short sword came out. The gladius, 18 inches of steel designed for one thing, close quarters killing. In open battle, the Faiguisa, Britain's longer swords were an advantage. Reach matters. But in the compressed funnel, jammed body to body, those long swords became useless. No room to swing, no space to build power. The gladius was perfect for this. Short, fast, thrust forward into the gaps between bodies, into throats, into stomachs, into the spaces that armor didn't cover. The legionaries advanced step by step, shield, thrust, step, shield, thrust, step. Behind them, the auxiliaries followed, finishing the wounded, widening the breach. On the wings, the cavalry waited. Not yet. Soon. The Britons weren't fighting anymore. They were being processed. Phase 5. The break watch. What happens next? The warriors at the front could see what was coming. They were being cut down, row by row, by an enemy they couldn't reach and couldn't stop. Screaming, dying, pushed forward by the mass behind them into the Roman blades. Panic started at the front and rippled backward. Men tried to turn, tried to flee. But the pressure from behind was still pushing forward. The warriors in the rear couldn't see what was happening at the front. They kept advancing, compressing, driving their own people into the slaughter. Then the Romans punched through. The wedge split the Briton host. The cavalry charged into the gaps, cutting down anyone who ran. The shield wall became a killing machine with moving parts, infantry grinding forward, cavalry sweeping the flanks, nowhere to hide, nowhere to stand. The Briton army broke. Tens of thousands of warriors turned and fled, back across the plain, back toward safety, back toward their families, back toward the wagons. The coffin closes. Here's where it gets dark. Beat. The wagons were still there, arranged at the edge of the plain, packed tight, loaded with families who came to watch a Roman defeat. Now those wagons formed a wall. The fleeing Britons slammed into their own baggage train. Wagons blocked the escape routes. Oxen panicked, carts overturned, a traffic jam of wood and flesh and terror. The warriors couldn't get through. They couldn't climb over. They couldn't go around. And the Romans were right behind them. The cavalry hit the trapped mass at full gallop. The infantry followed, shields up, swords working. The killing wasn't combat anymore. It was slaughter. It was butchery. It was a processing operation. Tacitus writes that the Romans cut down everyone, warriors, women, children, even the baggage animals. The legionaries had lost comrades in those burning cities. They'd seen what happened to Romans who surrendered to this revolt. They didn't stop. The wagons that came to watch victory became the walls of a killing floor. The families that came to celebrate became part of the body count. In the right terrain, numbers stopped mattering. Those numbers became corpses, stacked against the wagons, piled in the funnel, carpeting the plain. The numbers. By sunset, it was over. Tacitus gives us the count. 80,000 Britons dead. Roman losses? 400. Killed. Perhaps a similar number wounded. Let those numbers sit for a moment. Even if Tacitus exaggerated, and Roman historians always exaggerated, even if you cut the Briton casualties in half, in quarters, you're still looking at a kill ratio that defies explanation. 20 to 1, 50 to 1, maybe more. 80,000 dead, 400 dead. That's not a battle. That's not even a massacre. That's industrial killing 2,000 years before industry existed. How do you explain it? The funnel explains it? The Britons could only engage the Roman line a few thousand at a time. The rest were just pressure, pushing their own people into the blades. The shield wall explains it. An unbroken barrier that absorbed every charge, every impact, every surge of desperate humanity. The wagons explain it. When the army broke, there was nowhere to run. The escape routes were blocked by their own families, and the gladius explains it. A weapon designed for exactly this kind of close-quarters butchery. Thrust after thrust after thrust, hour after hour, until there was no one left standing. The Romans didn't fight 80,000 Britons. They processed them, in batches, through a funnel, against a wall, into a killing floor. In the right terrain, numbers stop mattering. They become weight. They become pressure. They become the force that drives your own army into the enemy's swords. Boudica's 2 deaths. And Boudica? Here's the thing. We don't know how she died. Tacitus says poison. She took her own life rather than face Roman chains. The defiant queen. The final act of resistance. A death she chose on her own terms. Dio says sickness. After the battle, she simply fell ill and died. No grand gesture, no dramatic exit. Just a body giving out after everything it had endured. Pick the one that haunts you more. The queen who burned 3 cities, who killed 70,000 Romans, who led the largest revolt in British history, reduced to either a vial of poison or a fever bed. Either way, she never saw Rome again. Either way, the revolt died with her. Her daughters disappear from history entirely. No record, no mention, just silence. The Iceni who survived faced Roman vengeance. Suetonius launched punitive expeditions, farms burned, villages destroyed, starvation used as a weapon. Rome eventually replaced Suetonius, not because he was too harsh, but because his harshness was counterproductive. Dead Britons don't pay taxes. The new administration chose profit over punishment. But the revolt was finished. Completely. Permanently. Britain would remain Roman for another 3 centuries. The missing legion. Remember Peneus Postumus, the commander of the 2nd Legion, the man who received Suetonius's urgent summons and didn't march, a third of the expected Roman force, sitting in the southwest while the fate of Britain hung on a thin shield wall. When news of the victory reached him, Peneus Postumus fell on his own sword. Think about what that tells us. He killed himself because his legion missed the battle, not because Rome lost, Rome won, but because his men were denied the glory, because he made a decision that, had the battle gone differently, would have doomed the province. Suetonius won with 10,000 men. He was supposed to have 15,000. The margin wasn't comfortable. It was a knife's edge. 1 section of shield wall breaking, 1 failed cavalry charge, 1 moment of panic in the Roman ranks. Any of those, and the funnel becomes a tomb for legionaries instead of Britons. Peneus Postumus understood how close it was. His suicide tells us what the victory reports don't. This wasn't inevitable. This was survival by the thinnest possible margin. The 2nd Legion's absence haunts this battle. A ghost in the numbers. A what-if that nobody in Rome wanted to examine too closely. The lesson. So what does Watling Street actually teach us? Not that Rome was invincible. 3 burned cities and 80,000 dead civilians prove otherwise. Not that numbers don't matter. In opens, ground, Suetonius would have been annihilated. Here's what it teaches. Terrain is choice. Suetonius didn't fight the battle Boudica wanted. He chose the ground. He chose the physics. He made the Britons fight on terms that negated everything they had. Confidence kills. The Britons brought their families to watch. They positioned wagons for the best view of Rome's humiliation. They were so certain of victory that they built the walls of their own coffin. Mass is not force. 100,000 warriors mean nothing if only 1,000 can fight at once. The funnel turned the Briton army into a queue for slaughter. The greatest numbers in the revolt's history became a liability. Every military disaster has a version of this lesson buried inside it. The army that attacks where the enemy wants them to attack. The general who mistakes size for strength. The confidence that blinds you to the trap you're walking into. Boudica had momentum. She had rage. She had numbers beyond counting. She didn't have the defile. The mystery remains. We still don't know where it happened. Somewhere in the Midlands, along Watling Street, the Roman road that gave the battle its name, near a forest, near a plain, near a funnel that ate an army alive. Archaeologists have searched for decades. No mass grave, no definitive site. The bodies of 80,000 Britons, if that number is even close to true, have never been found. Maybe the Romans buried them. Maybe the land swallowed them. Maybe the numbers were exaggerated and the actual dead numbered in the thousands, not the tens of thousands. We don't know. What we know is this. Something happened on that field that ended the largest revolt in British history in a single afternoon. Something turned an unstoppable wave into a carpet of corpses. Something made Roman historians reach for numbers so extreme they sound like mythology. The shield wall held, the funnel compressed, the wagons closed the trap, and by sunset, it was over. The final image, 61 AD, a nameless field along a Roman road. The sun is setting. The killing is finished. The Roman line stands intact, bloodied, exhausted, but unbroken. In front of them, a plain that isn't a plain anymore. It's a floor of bodies, stacked against overturned wagons, tangled in the traces of panicked oxen, piled in the throat of the defile where the funnel did its work. Somewhere in that carpet of dead. Warriors who burned Londinium. Families who came to watch a victory. Children who climbed wagons for a better view. 80,000, if you believe Tacitus. 40,000 if you don't. It doesn't matter. The number is beyond comprehension either way. The largest revolt in British history ended in an afternoon, not by superior weapons, not by luck, not by the gods, by a man who understood one thing his enemy didn't. In the right terrain, numbers stop mattering. The shield wall didn't stop the human wave. The trap did.